Generations of Americans have viewed the Kennedys as an iconic political dynasty known for service, for policy, and of course, for tragedy. After JFK and RFK, many other Kennedys have actually served in government. Today, RFK's son, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is running for president as an independent, and we are continuing his first interview on The Beat right now. And you mentioned that you've tragically lost family members to gun violence. Do you have a view about how that affected you, affected your worldview, perhaps may or may not have affected your view of policy? Because it is something that everyone honestly does know about you. It's the tragedy that you endured, that you grew up with. I guess that's I don't know how you want to answer it, if at all. It's a more personal question, but it's something people wonder.
How my father's death and my uncle's death affected how I internalized that or affected my approach to life.
How does it affect you? Yeah, if you again, it's only if you care to share that. How does it affect you as a person? Does it affect your outlook, your worldview? You're here now, 70 with your whole life, and you're running for office. But yeah, how does it affect you if you can share?
You know, I have to think about that. And oddly, I should have an answer for that because it's something, you know, that that affected me greatly. But, you know, when I think about my father and my uncle, I think that it wasn't their death so much that affected me, but their lives, their approach to life, and and I've spent a lot of my life not only with them, but then reading all the literature on them. I'm probably the only person in my family that's done that, and written histories about it, and sort of dissected their views on various issues, and that's affected me tremendously. In terms of the trauma, it's hard for me to just think, I was a drug addict for 14 years, and my addiction started right after my dad's death. But in my construction of events, I don't blame my father's death on my addiction. I feel like I was born like that I was born with an empty hole inside of me, and that I was looking for ways to fill it, things outside of me to fill it, and that's what addicts do. And
do other people in your life feel that way? Because we don't know, but you could imagine a friend or a partner or a doctor saying if the events occurred right after, they might see the link.
Well, of course, and I have no way of really of making that determination. So, I spend a lot of time in self-examination. I've been in recovery for 40 years. I go to meetings every day, and that's a process of constant self-examination. So, in my I've come down on the side that, the trauma clearly affects things about, I'm sure, how I process the world. But looking back on that does not help me in terms of, how do I negotiate what I need to do today? And I think when the parts of my life that are most influential in determining how I behave on a day-to-day basis, how I get out of, bed in the morning, make my bed, and, go about, be kind to people, and be judicious, and be, the way that I approach the world, I think is much more influenced by the role model that my father gave me, the role model that my uncle gave me, rather than the way they died. So I think, the answer to your question is I don't really know how that trauma impacted me. I can't really separate that from, many other traumas I've had, and we all have, everybody has trauma. But I do know that my uncle and my father's lives, the way they lived them, the choices they made, the moral center that they had, has affected me profoundly.
Understood. And look, people can only imagine how difficult that what might be, and then how do you make sense of it? But again, as a candidate, I'm going to ask you questions we ask other candidates.
My mom used to say to us, she said, everybody takes their licks, and she'd say, listen, we had it very easy compared to a lot of people who lost their father or their uncle. We had a big, loving family. We had the Catholic faith, which was very fortifying for us. We had people around us who loved us. We had good guidance. We had access to education, to money, to resources, to great friends. My mother used to say there's kids in Watts and Compton and Harlem who lose their fathers, who never see their fathers, who lose their fathers, their brothers to violence, and they don't have the resources that you do.
Right.
So,
Well,
to the extent that I was ever tempted to feel, pity for myself, my mother would abolish that immediately.
The other burden that someone in your position carries, which is very complicated, would be that because it was the Kennedys, wherever you go, right now you're choosing to come out and run for office, and you're putting yourself in this position, but for many years you could have not put yourself in this position. You could just be living, but everywhere you go, whether you choose it or not, this is something that people know about you and your family, that it lives with you. You know, that there's a difficulty to that, to being young and to having this thrust upon you at a level where these were moments that the whole country lived through.
Yeah, but I experienced that in a different way. I have people come up to me almost every day of my life and say, I remember your dad. Your dad inspired me. I remember where I was when he was killed. I don't always like to hear that because it does remind me of. Sometimes I feel restless when people are telling me I remember exactly where I was when your father was killed. Or your uncle was killed, but I know they mean it well, and I know that they love my family, and I know that I feel supported. I feel honored that so many people feel motivated to come up to me and say that, my father influenced them in a good way. So for me, it was never a burden. It was always something that was, I think, advantageous.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being willing to share that with us. If you run this campaign all year and lose, you will have achieved what? And if you run this campaign all year and, against the current understanding of the odds, become president, you will have achieved what? Would you be willing to answer both those in close?
Well, yeah, I intend to win, so I'm not going to answer the first question.
Spoken like a politician.
So, the answer, I think if I win the presidency, everything in this country will change. I feel America's lost its way. People, even people I love, like liberals who I grew up with and family members, I think they're so frightened of Donald Trump that they've lost perspective about the values that make us, a great nation and made our party, the Democratic Party, the embodiment of the highest ideals and the highest values of our nation. And I have a very clear notion of what this country is supposed to look like. I think we're supposed to be an exemplary nation where the world wants our leadership. They don't want our bullying. They know the difference.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Harry.
Good to talk with you.